Now read this.
Hello and welcome back to Now Read This, Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain, Book 2, The Black Cauldron. Chapter 9, The Brooch. The Brooch. Fluda's horse reared as the huntsmen turned their attack against him. The death of one of their band had roused the enemy to even greater violence and fury. "Take him to safety!" cried the bard. With a mighty leap, his steed cleared the bushes and streaked into the forest. The dwarf on his pony followed. With a shout of rage, the remaining huntsmen pursued them. Terran seized Luegor's bridle, and while Prydain clung to the horse's mane, raced toward the edge of the clearing. Eilonwy ran to meet them. Between them, they kept Prydain from falling and tore their way into the undergrowth. Gurgi, leading Menenlas, hurried after them. They ran blindly, stumbling through brambles and harsh nets of dead vines. The wind had risen, cold and biting as a winter's gale. But the forest opened a little, and as the ground dipped, they found themselves in a protected hollow in a glade of alders. From the back of Luegor, Prydain raised his head and gestured for them to stop. His face was grey and drawn, his black hair damp on his brow. "Put me down," he murmured. "Leave me. I can go no farther. How did the bard and Dolly fare?" "They have led the huntsmen away from us," Terran answered quickly. "We are safe here for a while. I know Dolly can throw them off our trail, and Fluda will help him. They'll join us again somehow, I'm sure. Rest now. I'll fetch your medicines from the saddlebags." Carefully they lifted Prydain from his steed and carried him to a hillock. While Eilonwy brought the leather water flask, Terran and Gurgi unharnessed Luegor and set the saddle under Prydain's head. The wind howled above the trees, but this sheltered spot, by contrast, seemed warm. The driven clouds broke away, the sun turned the branches to gold. Prydain raised himself, his grey eyes scanned the glade, and he nodded briefly. "Yes, this is a fair place. I shall rest here." "We shall heal your wound," Terran replied, hastily opening a packet of herbs. "You'll soon be comfortable, and if we must move, we can make a litter from branches and sling it between our horses." "I am comfortable enough," Prydain said. "The pain is gone, and it is pleasant here, as warm as spring." At Prydain's words, Terran's heart filled with terror. The quiet glade, the sun on the alders, seemed suddenly menacing. "Prydain!" he cried in alarm. "This is what you dreamed." "It is much like it," Prydain answered quietly. "You knew then!" cried Terran. "You knew there would be peril for you! Why did you not speak of it before? I would never have sought the marshes. We could have turned back." Prydain smiled. "It is true. Indeed, that is why I dared not speak. I have yearned to be again at the side of my beloved Arianlyn, and my thoughts are with her now. But had I chosen to return, I would ever wonder whether my choice was made through wisdom, or following the wishes of my own heart. I see this is as it must be, and the destiny laid upon me. I am content to die here." "You saved my life," Terran cried. "You will not lose your own life for me. We shall find our way to Caer-Codon and Gwydion." Prydain shook his head. He put his hand to his throat and undid the iron clasp at the collar of his jacket. "Take this," he said. "Guard it well. It is a small thing, but more valuable than you know." "I must refuse," answered Terran with a smile that ill-concealed his anxiety. "Such would be the gift of a dying man, but you shall live, Prydain." "Take it," Prydain repeated. "This is not my command to you, but the wish of one friend to another." He pressed the brooch into Terran's unwilling hand. Eilonwy had come with water to steep the herbs. Terran took it from her and knelt again beside Prydain. Prydain's eyes had closed. His face was calm. His hand lay outstretched and open on the ground. And thus he died. When their grief abated a little, the companions hollowed out a grave, lining it with flat stones. Wrapping him in his cloak, they lowered Prydain into the earth and laid the turf gently over him, while Luegor whinnied plaintively and pawed the dry ground. Then they raised a mound of boulders. In a sheltered corner of the glade, Eilonwy found handfuls of small flowers, still untouched by the frost. These she scattered on the grave, where they fell among the crevices and seemed to spring from the rocks themselves. They remained there silently until nightfall, without a sign of Fflewddur or Dolly. "We shall wait for them until dawn," Terran said. "Beyond that, we dare not stay. I fear we have lost more than one gallant friend." "Adain warned that I would grieve," he murmured to himself, "and so I do, thrice over." Too burdened with sorrow, too weary even to set a guard, they huddled in their cloaks and slept. Like his spirit, Terran's dreams were confused, filled with dismay and fury and fear. In them he saw the mournful faces of the companions, the calm face of Adain. He saw Ellidyr seized by a black beast that sank its claws into him and gripped him until Ellidyr cried out in torment. The restless images gave way to a vast sweep of meadow, where Terran ran through grasses shoulder high, desperately seeking a path he could not find. Overhead, a grey bird fluttered and spread its wings. He followed it, and a path opened at his feet. He saw, too, a turbulent stream with a great boulder in the midst of it. On the boulder lay Fflewddur's harp, which played of itself as the wind stirred the strings. Terran was running, then, through a trackless marsh. A bear and 2 wolves set upon him and made to rend him with their fangs. Terrified, he sprang into a dark pool, but the water suddenly turned to dry land. The enraged beasts snarled and leapt after him. He woke with a start, his heart pounding. The night had barely ended. The first streaks of dawn rose above the glade. Eilonwy stirred. Gurgi whimpered in his sleep. Terran bowed his head and put his face in his hands. The dream lay heavily upon him. He could still see the gaping jaws of a wolf and the sharp white teeth. He shuddered. He knew he must decide now whether to return to Caer or seek the marshes of Morva. Terran looked beside him at the sleeping figures of Gurgi and Eilonwy. In little more than a day, the companions had been scattered like leaves, and there remained only this pitifully small band, itself lost and driven. How could they hope to find the cauldron? Terran doubted they would even be able to save their own lives, yet the journey to Caer would be as perilous as this quest, perhaps more so. Nevertheless, a choice had to be made. He rose after a time and saddled the horses. Eilonwy was now awake, and Gurgi was poking a tousled, twig-covered head from the folds of his cloak. "Hurry," Terran ordered. "We'd better get off an early start, before the huntsmen overtake us." "They'll find us soon enough," Eilonwy said. "They're probably as thick as burdock between here and Caer "We are going to the marshes," Terran said. "Not Caer "What?" Eilonwy cried. "Are you still thinking about those wretched swamps? Do you seriously think we can find that cauldron, let alone haul it back from wherever it is?" "On the other hand," Eilonwy went on, before Terran could answer her, "I suppose it's the only thing we can do, now that you've got us in this stew, and there's no telling what Ellidyr has in mind, if you hadn't made him jealous over a silly horse." "I feel pity for Ellidyr," Terran answered. "Adain once told me he saw a black beast on Ellidyr's shoulders. Now I understand a little what he meant." "Well," remarked Eilonwy, "I'm surprised to hear you say that. But it was kind-hearted of you to help Islamak. I'm really glad you did. I'm sure you meant well, and that's encouraging in itself. It does make a person think there might be some hope for you after all." Terran did not reply, for he was still anxious and oppressed, although the disturbing dreams had already begun to fade. He swung astride Mellinlas. Gurgi and Eilonwy shared Luegor, and the companions swiftly rode from the glade. It was Terran's intention to head southward, hoping somehow to come upon the marshes of Morva within another day, although he admitted to himself that he had no more than a vague idea of their distance or exact location. The day was bright and crisp. As Mellinlas cantered over the frosty ground, Terran caught sight of a glittering, dew-covered web on a hawthorn branch, and of a spider busily repairing it. Terran was aware, strangely, of vast activities along the forest trail. Squirrels prepared their winter hoard, Ants laboured in their earthen castles. He could see them clearly, not so much with his eyes, but in a way he had never known before. The air itself bore special scents. There was a ripple, sharp and clear, like cold wine. Terran knew, without stopping to think, that a north wind had just begun to rise. Yet, in the middle of this, he noticed another scent mingled through. He turned Melanlas toward it. "Since you're leading us," Eilonwy remarked, "I wonder if it would be too much to expect you to know where you're going." "There is water nearby," Terran said. "We shall need to fill our flasks." He hesitated, puzzled. "Yes, there is a stream," he murmured. "I'm sure of it. We must go there." Nevertheless, he could not quite overcome his surprise when, after a short while, they indeed came upon a swift-running brook, winding its way through a stand of rowans. They rowed to its bank. With a cry, Terran sharply reined in Melanlas. On a rock in the middle of the stream sat Fluda, cooling his bare feet in the water. The bard leapt up and splashed across to greet the companions. Though haggard and worn, he appeared unwounded. "Now there's a stroke of luck, my finding you. You're finding me, rather. I hate to admit it, but I'm lost completely. Got turned around somehow after Dolly and I began leading the huntsmen a chase. Tried to make my way back to you and got lost even more. How is Prydain? I'm glad you managed to—" The bard stopped. Terran's expression told him what had happened. Fluda shook his head sadly. "There are few like Prydain," he said. "We can ill afford the loss, nor the loss of our good old Dolly." "I'm not sure what happened," Fluda went on. "All I know is that we were galloping at top speed. You should have seen him. He rode like a madman, popping invisible and back again, the huntsmen racing after him. If it hadn't been for him, they'd have dragged me down for certain. They're stronger than ever now. Then my horse fell. That is to say," the bard hastily added, as his harp strings tensed and jangled, "I fell off. Fortunately, by that time, Dolly had led them well away. At the rate he was going," Fluda sighed heavily. "What has befallen him since then, I do not know." The bard bound up his leggings. He had walked all the distance, and was quite pleased to be riding once again. Gurgi mounted behind him on Luegor. Terran and Eilonwy rode Melanlas. The bard's news lowered Terran's spirits further, for he realized now there was little chance of Dolly rejoining them. Nevertheless, he continued to lead the companions southward. Until he should recognize a landmark, Fluda agreed this was the only course. "The trouble is," he explained, "if we veer too far south, we'll simply end up in the sea and miss the marshes altogether." Terran himself could offer no suggestions. Downcast, he gave Melanlas rein and made little effort to guide the stallion. The trees thinned out behind him, and the companions entered a wide, rolling meadow. Terran, half dozing in the saddle, his cloak wrapped around his shoulders, roused himself uneasily. The meadow, with its high grass stretching all around them, was familiar. He had seen it before, where he could not quite remember. He fingered Prydain's clasp at his throat. Suddenly, with fear and excitement, he understood. His hands trembled at the discovery. Terran glanced overhead. A grey bird circled, glided downward on outspread wings, then flew rapidly across the fields and disappeared from sight. "That was a marsh bird," Terran said, quickly turning Melanlas. "If we follow this way," he added, pointing in the direction of the bird's flight, "I'm sure we'll come directly to Morva." "Well done!" cried the bard. "I must say I never would have noticed it." "That's at least one clever thing you've done today," Eilonwy admitted. "This is not my doing," Terran said with a puzzled frown. "Prydain spoke the truth. His gift is a precious one." He told Eilonwy hurriedly about the clasp and the dreams of the night before. "Don't you see?" he cried. "I dreamed about Fluda's harp, and we found Fluda himself. It wasn't all my own idea to go looking for a stream. It just came to me, and I knew we would find it. Just now, when I saw that bird, that was in my dream. And there was another dream, a terrible one, of wolves. That's going to happen too, I'm sure of it. Prydain's dreams were always true. He told me of them." At first, Eilonwy was loath to believe him. "Prydain was a wonderful man," she said. "You can't tell me it was all because of a piece of iron. I don't care how magical it is." "I don't mean that," Terran said. What I believe, he added thoughtfully, is that Prydain understood these things anyway. Even with his clasp, there is much I do not understand. All I know is that I feel differently somehow. I can see things I never saw before, or smell or taste them. I can't say exactly what it is. It's strange and awesome in a way, and very beautiful sometimes. There are things that I know, Terran shook his head, and I don't even know how I know them. Eilonwy was silent for a moment. Yes, she said slowly. I believe it now. You don't even sound quite like yourself. Prydain's clasp is a priceless gift. It gives you a kind of wisdom, she added, which I suppose is what assistant pig keepers need more than anything else.
Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.